this group obviously does. And this, in some ways, feels almost like an extension in this intellectual forum of the kind of remembrance that David had the privilege to attend firsthand. As I set up my slideshow here, a brief one, to feature just a few images of Miller from across the span of time that I had the opportunity to know him. A span less than Al, 3 years less than Larry, a few more than you guys, and perhaps about as long as you and government. I want to also thank you guys for what you distinctly bring, whether it's the funded memory, admiration, and recognition you extended to him in the recent conference. And I want to thank you for your emotion, because I think that authenticity is something that is really worth underscoring and very much in keeping with who he is. So let me see if I can make a connection here firmly. And to do that, make me do the settings. As Beverly was talking, sharing Nadia's remembrances and maybe implicitly a few of her own about one of the most memorable times that I spent with Miller was in Australia, where for a full month she actually withheld the conditions under which we were living. We were in a student residence with a rowdy bunch of young men. This was a young men's residence for the University of Wollongong, and it was an extraordinary environment. I didn't know until that time that people could subsist purely on spongy white bread and Vegemite. Along with Miller, that was about all that was on offer. And that gave new meaning to the idea that beer is not the breakfast anymore. So I'm trying here to connect, and I'm not having the success that I'd hoped for in that. Do we have someone who's able to contact the tech people?
Yep.
That would be great, Jeff. As we do that, I just have a 3-minute slide presentation, which I want to share with you some images of Miller, and also a voiceover of his. A voiceover taken from a conversation that featured Jack Adams Weber, of course, a complete, in his words, unreconstructed grid head, repertory grid enthusiast. Charlie Steffen, representing a clinical voice, my brother Greg, and myself, at the 1987 Memphis conference. And the piece I'd like to play is just 3 minutes of Miller's riff on what Jack had just said and his enthusiasm about repertory grids. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get that up and share that with you. The other thing I wanted to share was just to give Miller a few words of his own. And I think about the papers of his that have moved me, just as you spoke about the words, both personal words to you and to us as a community that moved you, Larry. And I remember Metaphors for Living from the 1976 Nebraska Symposium on Motivation, actually held in the fall of 1975, as just lighting me up like a Christmas tree. I just was so enthusiastic about that. And the first of the images I want to show you is of Miller in the context of the other presenters at that conference, many of whom you may recognize. Another highlight that seems very appropriate to hear was Miller's address at Pine Manor College in Boston in 1983 at the conference. And it's from that I'm drawing on his publication, The Long Quest to Know. So until they get this going, or for the next 4 minutes, whichever elapses first, I'll share with you a few of his thoughts here. And here, what Miller is doing is really meditating on George Kelly, the spirit of Kelly, the letter of Kelly, and trying to extract something of the essence of the man. Something that I think Miller himself was very good at. Back in Wollongong, in fact, Miller used to chide me. I was younger, more naive, more enthusiastic, and tireless at that time. And he sat in one office, and I sat in another, and all day long, for several days, for weeks on end, students would come by consulting about their projects, no doubt directed by Beverly and Linda Vining to do so. And at the end of the day, the first day, Miller came forward and said, "Bob, you completely exhaust me." Can we, is that? Just to reinitiate. Good, good. Thank you for that. And he said, "You seem to have boundless enthusiasm for all of these projects." And what I realized in listening to you is, Beverly, is that, in voicing the words of Nadia, that the difference was that I had enthusiasm for the projects. And I really devoted myself to those projects. And he devoted himself to the people. And he had the maturity to do that in a way that I did not at the time. I think that really in some way was emblematic of the man. Here's what he said, sort of riffing on the thoughts of George Kelly. He says, I've wrestled with George Kelly's ideas on and off for over 20 years, and I'm still finding much in his writing that touches and affects me in ways that I don't understand. For me, the main inspiration in his writing has been that he seems to be pointing us toward what I would call a psychology of personal knowing, which I'm sure would be something different from the landscape of psychology that we now inhabit. Kelly's contributions were almost entirely conceptual, and his limitations were also conceptual. Sometimes he couldn't quite reach far enough, and sometimes he could only speak from within certain issues that he couldn't yet get out, look at, and talk about. For me, Kelly's work was not an end in itself, or a place to stop, but part of a larger tradition. In this tradition, Kelly is offering a meeting place for the moment, where he's suggesting the getting together of issues in science, the arts, religion, and a number of other disciplines. And it is that kind of meeting that we seem to be invited to here. A couple of other quotes here. So much of his approach is held clearly within the structure of the Protestant tradition, personal knowing, lived knowing, rather than knowing in the head. He uses terms like commitment, involvement, sin, repentance, threat, guilt, risk, faith, to describe the profound venture of man reaching to know, to reach into the unknown, toward the truth that lies wholly beyond our changing approximation, seen through a glass darkly, a long way from knowing as we may yet be known. And then he goes on to ask the question, what kind of world does Kelly's vision configure? Does he invite us to step into? And does Miller himself step into in this way? And he says that in rereading Kelly's essays in particular, I've tried to do so with the eyes of my mind half closed, as it were, so that I might sense something of the main factors of the kind of world he was inhabiting in the psychology he was struggling to create. As I looked and listened in this way, many of the details and particulars of the elements fell away, and I began to conjure up something of that possible world whose reality he sought especially to realize. It is a world of edges, exceptions, extremities, incidents, moments, intimacy, opportunity and crisis, tragedy, uncertainty, transformation, lack of solidity, risk, demand, personal involvement, radical involvement of who we are and who we are to become. It is a world of epic nudity, epic pretending, wherein we become who we are and who we are not, through the fig leaves of who we risk acting as. It is a world of profound moral demand, or at least moral opportunity, in which good and evil between man and man, man and world, are major protagonists, though now, in contrast to times past, we confront them as soldiers, statesmen, judges, and juries, and so on. We're having modest success with this, I think. So let me see what's happening there. No, I think we don't have time for it. And maybe what we can do is perhaps I can play the audio file, if not the video. Let's see if that'll work. What I have featured here were some images of Miller in the company of others at a number of conferences, beginning really with the 76 Nebraska Symposium, progressing to Christ Church College, and on to the Pine Manor College conference and the Memphis conference. But let me see if by playing the slideshow I can at least hear his voice. Now let me give you the context of this. You can imagine, some of you who know Jack Adams Weber, the enthusiasm that Jack is capable of for repertory grids, this kind of mathematicized understanding of psychological space. and he was speaking with great passion of the cutting-edge advancements in the field as we began to be able to extract the knowledge held by experts and place them in computer programs. And it was this to which Miller then was responding. Well, yes, I guess I might need to do that because this is not connecting. Let's see if we can. Oh, this may be a wholly unsuccessful attempt.
I mean, I think there is no single edge, cutting edge, forefront or whatever, because I can listen to what Jack is saying and my blood runs cold. So does his. And I'd say, fine, that sounds great, and I believe that things kind of feed each other at stages, very often. I think that when we talk about cutting edges, all about the work we do. I mean, we're essentially talking about what we're interested in ourselves. So that I will say the cutting edge